Hi, this is David Smith again at The Art of David Smith. This is the second of the videos. So in this video we're going to concentrate on how we shade a face. So obviously in the first lesson we roughed out where the face goes, and obviously I've marked down on the side here eye level, base of nose and things like that. But if you want to refer to the first video to get you up to this stage, by all means run through that. What I've done with this face then is I've just taken it a stage further forward than this, just put a few more details in, cleaned a few lines up, ready to make my life easier for the shading. So you can see the refinements from this one to this one. So again, it's going to make my life a little bit easier when we start to shade. So what we're going to try and do is, it's going to be quite a generic shading. So we're going to assume that the light is coming kind of down onto the subject, but from a forward direction. Obviously, if you look for reference material, and there's plenty online, you can look how the face changes by having the light come in from the side, left or right, and the difference it's going to make to the overall look of the face. But obviously that's going forward, that's a little bit more advanced than this. So we'll start with the eyes. Now, some of you may have noticed I tend to use a pump pencil for a lot of my drawings, simply because it's just saves me having to sharpen my pencil all the time. It keeps the lead nice and sharp, and it's just something I've kind of found. I do it through habit now, using the pump pencil. When I get into more of the heavy shading, I will start bringing in the likes of the Bs. So 4B, 5B is typically what I would go to get the nice heavy blacks. Obviously you can go right up to the 9Bs if you want, but I've never really found a need to go that high with the stuff. So I tend to start with the eye, and what I'm going to do for this video is I'm going to concentrate on one half of the face. Obviously when you're doing this, try and bring both eyes up at a similar time, because you get the balance right then. If you concentrate just on one eye or one ear or something like that without bringing them both up together, you'll find most of the time you'll get an imbalance, and you'll get one what looks really good and the other one's not quite cutting it. So if you try and bring them both up at the same time, you're just going to find it that much easier. So I tend to go in with some of the quite dark tones, give it a little bit of structure at the first. And I always, but always, regardless of whether it's an animal I'm working on or a portrait, go in with the eyes. If I get the eyes right, I know the rest of the picture is going to work fine from there. If you don't get the eyes right, start again, because really it's the eyes which are going to sell the overall picture. It's going to convince people that it looks correct and you've captured the person's likeness, or however you want to judge the results on that. But I always find, get the eyes right, everything else is going to follow from there. So what I'm basically doing is going around the eye, the dark area, and then obviously we've got the iris in the centre, trying to put in as well some of the highlights, keep a highlighted area. Now usually there's more than one highlight on an eye, and often at the base of the eye it will be paler anyway, because it's picking up reflections, as you'll find on the nose and the lips. The light bounces off all the surfaces, so although we've got the light coming down, because the light's then bouncing back up underneath the nose, at the base of the eye and on the lips, you're going to get a certain amount of reflection back up off of the surface, and that's going to make those elements look lighter. And if you don't put them in, you don't get the same kind of life in the overall picture. So trust me, put them in for the moment and you'll see what the overall effect is. So kind of defining the eye now as you pop it in, and obviously we've got this, not with everybody, but we're going to assume that there's obviously the eyelid there as well. At this point I'll often put in some of the eyelashes, give that a little bit of structure. Now one of the other things what I tend to use is I never use a finger for smudging, for blending or anything like that, because not only do you tend to find fingerprints on your finished picture, but you don't have the same kind of control. Use some blending sticks. They're as cheap as chips, and you can find them from most art shops, and you can certainly find these things online for very, very little money. Come in a variety of sizes, but what you can do then is when you shade into an area, you can drag that shading off and get a nice subtle graduation of colour across, particularly places like the eyelid and stuff like that, where you want a nice soft shaded effect, same as underneath the eyes. Now sometimes when I'm doing this, I'll have one of my heavier pencils off to the side, something like that. I will shade a little bit of an area, and then I'll often as well kind of dip into that and use that underneath, say for the underneath of the eye. So it's, again, it's nice and subtle. You can just drag that kind of colour around into there as well, and it just gives that far, far better effect than trying to do all this with just a pencil. It's very, very difficult, and you'll often end up with a lot of lines in there and things like that. So as you can see, starting to bring that down now, because the light's coming from above, there's going to be a certain amount of shade on the actual eyeball itself as well, obviously at the top. I'm going to bring that down. As soon as we start doing these kind of things, it really starts lifting the overall effect of the eye. So again, some of these lines I'm having to put in darker than I normally would if I was drawing this for a client, simply so you can pick that up on the camera. So we've got the eyelashes on the lower eye, so I can just define that a little bit more, come in again with the blender, drag those colours around. And on the side of the nose, start to giving that a little bit more definition. I'm going to use my pencil to shade into that area, put onto the side of the nose as well, start building up the structure of that. So you may have heard somebody just coming in from the kitchen there in my house, so we'll just ignore that for the moment. But a little bit of shading at the side of the nose. Again, we're saying that the light's coming straight towards us. Now as we start getting to the base of the nose, I'll just swap back to the other pencil, start defining the nostril area. So after I've usually done the eyes, I'll move down into the nose again, into one of the darker zones, start putting some structure into there. Bring the side of the nose in. Now obviously because the light's coming from above, we're going to have quite a dark area underneath the nose, and then into obviously this, essentially the little indentation underneath the nose. I'm going to give that a bit of definition as well. Now what I was saying about reflections, underneath the nose is the real classic one. So at the base of the nose, we're going to put a quite dark area in there, but I'm not going right to the very bottom. What I'm going to do is I'm going to blend that out. So it's not going to be white because it's not a real vivid reflection, but what I'm going to do is not take that darkness right to the very bottom, because in reality this will be picking up the reflection from the floor or anything that you're roughly near, and by doing that it gives the nose that real 3D effect. I'm then going to bring obviously the shading around the side, and because the light's coming from above again, there's going to be a light patch on the top of the nostril. Again, we're going to soften all this, so it might look a little bit ragged at the moment, but then when I go in with my blending tool, and the reason for this bit of paper is obviously what I'm not wanting to do is bring up these lines now with the back of my hand, because we're going to cause a lot of smudging and potentially ruin all our hard work. So I tend to have a whole bunch of scrap paper about from past sketches and things like that, which I tend to use to rest on. I've tried the gloves, really I can't get on with those things, so I'll just go back to using scrap piece of paper to stop me lifting the lines. So again, we move back up towards the nose area, and a lot of the time it's going to be building these colours up, so don't go in with the real heavy blacks just yet. Build them up slowly. It's a lot easier to add, it's a lot more difficult to take away. So just slowly build up those darker tones and use your blending tool to blend them out. Now what I'm going to try and do in the description, because obviously this video is going to be slightly longer than the first one, is put in key markers, so you'll be able to jump to stages of the video. Same with the ears. We put the darker areas in, so obviously underneath the ear, bring those down, add the darker areas in, and then we're going to blend those again to soften those tones. Now, as I mentioned before, this is quite a generic face, what we're endeavouring to draw here. Your best drawings are going to be if you use real examples or real photographs of people. So use this for the basics, look for how you should be shading areas, but then look for good reference material, because that will give you your greater degree of success, more realism as well if you're actually drawing real faces as opposed to these generic front-on type of faces. This is all this is for, is a guide as to help you to move forward, pick up a few of the tricks. So we're kind of working on this cheek area here, and from the side of the nose, the other side of the cheek, what we're going to bring in. Now, what I want to do is define this underneath the nose a little bit more, so we then give it a real presence, a real feeling of solidity for the nose, that it's actually a 3D object on the face. Obviously I'm concentrating more on this right hand side, you're going to bring both sides up at the same time, so it might look a little bit odd at first, but you should start seeing how the overall effect is going to work. So from there I'll then move into the lip area. So again, how we drew the lips, when in the last video I referred to it being a bit like a comedy pair of lips at this point, is because you wouldn't normally shade them this way or draw them this way in order to shade them. So I tend to put in the black line between the two lips first, because we know that is a definite line between the two. As it gets to the edge, it softens a lot. So for the top lip, what we tend to do is more strokes like this. So if you imagine the centre line of the lips, we're going to stroke up to the top. And this kind of follows that type of lip effect, what we have with the lines and the things like that on our lips. We're kind of echoing that with the way we draw the lines of the lips in. By doing that, it gives us the correct shading effect for the lips in the right orientation of the lines. The lines add to the overall effect, making it look more like a pair of proper lips as well. as opposed to comedy lips. And then when at this stage I just kind of blend into that a little bit more. Now at the top of these lips we're kind of just going to put in a little bit of an edge and then start bringing the reverse down, so little lines which are defining the edges of the lips. Now some of the light is obviously picked up on the top of the lips, and then and because of the top lips overhanging, we want this one's going to be slightly darker than the lower lip. The lower lip is going to start picking up the light which we've already said is coming from the top. So again we're going to bring these lines down. Now around this area on the lips is where we're going to start picking up light. So we're going to leave that area, shade underneath it. It's kind of this choppy line effect. And then you've got drag ever so often one of the lines down, just like your real lips would be. So if you look at them in a mirror, you obviously can see that kind of effect, what I'm going for. So the base of the lip, I have this darker area again, but at the very edge of the lower lip we're going to have this slightly paler area, again picking up the reflections from underneath the face, and it gives it that extra feeling of structure and realism. And again, it's one of those things, the more you do this, the better effect you will get. This is merely to get you started, give you the confidence. And I've had some lovely feedback from the first video. People who have often stayed away from drawing portraits, have liked how easy they've been able to follow the video, how clear it was. So again, that's what I'm trying to do with this video. I'm trying to make it nice and easy, give you some of the pointers to what to look out for. So then underneath this lip, again I want to give it a little bit of structure so it looks like it's a 3D object, and then I'm going to blend that out as well. Top of the chin is obviously going to be a lot paler than the base of the chin because it's picking up the light, what's reflecting down into there. So for this point I'm just going to put in some shade, give it a little bit of obviously picking up of the whiskers, what would be there and stuff like that. Tends to be not a smooth area on men because of the shaving and everything else what's going on. So we're just going to give it a little bit of structure that way. And again, when we go in with the blending tool, I'm going to use a little bit down here for the reflection on the base of the chin. But then at this point we're going to make this area a little bit darker, so it definitely feels more three-dimensional. I'll often use this kind of shuffly shading and then alter that with a little bit of smooth when I'm wanting to get into an area. Again, leaving this pale because obviously as the chin moves into the neck area and we've got that overhang, we want to be very dark here because we're going to want to lift the face away from the neck and give it that real feeling. That it's a real 3D object and that it's got definition. So obviously the face then, as soon as you start doing the neck area and making it a little darker on there because of the shading and how the light's falling on there, it then pushes that face forward and gives it that three-dimensional look that we're after. Again, there's a certain amount of it looking slightly odd at this stage because we're only doing half the face, but at least it's giving you that feeling and giving you an idea of what the overall look is going to be. Moving to the eyebrows, so because we're obviously happy with the eye area, so put the eyebrows in. Now roughly what happens when you look at an eyebrow, you get to about this point, which is directly over the eye, and the eyelashes seem to change direction. They come not quite horizontal, but they certainly kind of fall over at this point, so they're quite 45 degrees I suppose at this point, and then really drop off at this. And just like with everything else, eyebrows are different, bushier, more refined, depending on who it is that you're drawing. But again, we're going to go in with this generic eyebrow area. And then again, because I'm using the pump pencil, or a sharp pencil that you're using, you can just define some of that hair and make it as bushy or not as you see fit. Around this eye, we want to drag some of the shading out of there, kind of push it into the eyebrow area, and then as you can see, I'm using this technique. The light and the shade tend to curve around at this point on the eyebrow, and then it moves into the cheek area. Obviously with this cheek area you can work at it as much as you need to, maybe put in a little bit of detail, something like that. Mole, beauty spot, even odd mark, blemish on the face. It gives it a realism then, because people's skins generally aren't perfect. There's some sort of flaw on there, and it all adds to the overall impression. Same with the forehead, kind of a rough, scrappy shading what I'm putting in, because I know I'm going to come at it again with the blender, move that colour around, and if it's a little bit too rough I can just take it back out with the eraser if I need to. But for the purposes of this exercise, it's just showing you how to start shading with the forehead. Now again, obviously if you start mirroring this over to the other side and bringing it up, the overall structure of the face is going to really start to jump out. At that point then you can start obviously putting in details. I'm not going to cover this in this video because hair is quite straightforward in a lot of ways. As long as you don't go in, keep the life, there's as much light goes into hair as there is darkness. If you were to just black this out completely, you would absolutely kill the hair, the life in there. So again, go in with some of the lines, bit of a blending to knock out some of the shade, but then pick out some of the lines as well. And then in certain areas when you're working on it, leave some quite strong highlights. This just gives an overall life to the hair, because it picks up a lot of the reflections from the lights around it, and again you will flatten the overall picture if you take all that life out of the hair. So again, quite generic hair what we're going to put onto this. And if the hair's overhanging, then obviously at this point we're going to have an area of shade underneath that again, and then as it moves further down the forehead it lightens, blends out. So hopefully that will have given you an insight into the next stage of constructing a face. Again, what I'd say is take these exercises, practice them, because these are going to give you the basics for the for any other portraits that you end up doing. If you have any comments, please leave the comments. Please leave your comments in the comment section below, and I will try and answer everybody's comments. If you've got any feedback, or if there's anything else that you'd like me to cover, if you want me to do a particular lesson on how to maybe draw a very detailed eye, we can make it a lot larger, we can look to do things like that. But hopefully you've been able to follow this lesson. You'll have some success with what you're doing. Any questions, like I say, just by all means message me. But if you like what you see, feel free to subscribe to my page. Every subscription really helps, as do every comment and watching of the video, so I really appreciate it, and thank you very much again. Thanks for watching.